The Sasuke Retrieval Arc is one of the best arcs in the Naruto series and my personal favorites. It's the arc that's famously known for when the boys became men. The first mission Naruto and his friends were in completely alone, facing enemies that would not let them survive and would do everything to fulfill their mission. So it would make a lot of sense for a character or two to die in this particular arc. After all, the arc is gonna end up in a failure. The Sasuke Retrieval team are not going to retrieve Sasuke. We've seen several dark things happening in this arc, so for a character death to happen here that's not from one of the bad guys, it would make complete sense from an in-universe perspective. After all, this was a very difficult mission, the Genins were way in over their heads, and also from an out-of-universe narrative perspective, it would give the arc even more weight. It would be even more tragic. But nobody dies from the retrieval team, which is not what Kishimoto wanted to do. Kishimoto was going to kill a few characters in this arc. However, he went back on that thought. It is very clear from how Kishimoto wrote both Choji and Neji in the Sasuke Retrieval Arc that they were supposed to die. If not both of them by the end of the arc, which is probably what his original intention was, at least one of them. But Kishimoto retconned that idea and essentially made the two characters survive. Now, a lot of people say that yeah, it's kind of obvious that would happen because Kishimoto doesn't have any plans for Neji and Choji in Naruto Shippuden, and that's because they were supposed to die at the end of part 1, so naturally Kishimoto wouldn't have new plans for them, but that's not exactly true, I would say. After all, several characters from the Konoha 12 were kind of forgotten in Naruto Shippuden. The only one that gets very satisfactory development is Shikamaru. The others are just kind of there. And to be honest, Neji and Choji get way more development in Shippuden like other characters such as Rock Lee, Shino, Kiba, and Tenten. Choji got an end to his arc when he fought against Edo Tensei Asuma in the War Arc, and Neji got an end to his arc when he died to a twig in the War Arc. They weren't great endings to their character arcs. I don't like either of those, but at least they were there, unlike these other characters that I cited. So just saying that, oh, Kishimoto, he just didn't have any plans, so it's obvious he wanted to kill them in Naruto Part 1 doesn't make a lot of sense, because he didn't have plans for many characters at least. However, there were other pieces of evidence that Kishimoto was going to kill those two, and I find those much more interesting from a storytelling writing perspective. So let's talk about why this is the case, why Kishimoto made them survive, and why it's rather obvious those two characters were initially supposed to die. The first thing you have to keep in mind is that the Naruto manga was released weekly. I was not reading the Naruto manga weekly when the Neji and Choji fights in the Sasuke Retrieval Arc came out. That was a long time ago, but obviously a lot of people were. And that's a very interesting thing that happens in this arc that many people don't even realize, which is that Choji's fight against Jirobo ends in chapter 191, and Neji's fight against Kidomaru ends in chapter 198. After that, we don't know what happened to those two characters for over 40 chapters. We only find out Neji and Choji survive in chapter 235. Put yourselves in the shoes of somebody that was reading Naruto Weekly back in the day. You just read the ending of Choji's fight against Jirobo, and you only find out what happened to Choji 44 chapters later in chapter 235. That's almost a year, because there were about 50 chapters released every year, so 44 chapters, yeah, very close to that. And for Neji, it's the same thing. It's not as much, but it's still a long time. Obviously, this is a very interesting narrative tool to increase tension and to make readers wonder, make theories, speculate. It's great for the fandom, but it's also a lot of time for Kishimoto to change his mind on what he originally intended with those two characters. It's a lot of time for Kishimoto to see the fan cry of people wanting Choji, and especially Neji, who was a fan favorite, to survive. It's a lot of time for Kishimoto to get cold feet and feel like killing two kids here wouldn't be the best option for the story. So why am I saying those two characters were supposed to die? Let's analyze both Choji's and Neji's roles in the Sasuke Retrieval Arc. Starting with Choji, who was the first one to fight. Now, unlike Neji, Choji never really had a big role in the story. Neji had a lot to do in the Chunin exams. There was an entire mini-arc surrounding him, the entire lore behind the Hyuga clan, the fight against Hinata, and then the fight against Naruto, and Neji's character develops a lot, and his perspective on the world completely changes, no longer believing that everybody has a set destiny. Neji overall, for a side character especially, had a lot of screen time in the Naruto series and the Chunin exams, which simply did not happen with Choji. He was there, we saw what he was all about, he liked to eat, he was a bit of a coward. Shikamaru had to drag him into the battlefield in the Forest of Death for them to face the Sound Team. Choji also didn't want to fight against Osu in the preliminaries, and then Asuma kind of convinces him to fight because he's gonna pay him some barbecue, but Choji was mostly used as a joke. We see a few glimpses of Choji and Shikamaru being very good friends when Choji calls calls that Shikamaru is going to quit the fight against Himari before the fight even starts, pretty much. But series development for Choji only starts in the Sasuke Retrieval Arc, when we see that scene in the barbecue shop of Shikamaru being promoted and then Asuma chastising Choji for only wanting to eat and not train, and also Ino telling Choji, oh, nobody likes fat boys, girls are never gonna like you, Choji, but Shikamaru is the only one who stands up for Choji, saying that, oh, Ino doesn't know crap, you should be who you are, Choji. Don't let them dictate what are you going to do in your life just because it doesn't fit them, which really builds this trust and mutual respect between Shikamaru and Choji. Shikamaru understands Choji and he doesn't go with the majority there. This is also seen in the brief flashback between Choji and Shikamaru when Choji is fighting Jirobo. And Choji is built with a character flaw that he lacks confidence. That's why he stayed behind first, because he wanted to prove he could be useful for his team, and his bond with Shikamaru is even reinforced before the fight begins when Jirobo imprisons the entire retrieval squadron in that dome of earth that drains their chakra, and Shikamaru was coming up with a plan, fooling Jirobo, saying that he was going to betray his team and just let Shikamaru leave, it's gonna be fine and the others can just die there. Naruto and Kiba were pissed at Shikamaru, but Choji was the first one to understand Shikamaru was coming up with a plan, and then Neji understood it as well. And there's the entire theme of everybody thinks Choji's a joke, Ino thinks he's fat and nobody's gonna like him, Asuma doesn't think he's gonna amount to much because he only eats. When Shikamaru comes by to recruit Choji into the retrieval squadron, Naruto scoffs at him and was like, what, him? I was expecting something useful like Shino, for example. When Choji starts to eat inside the earth dome to replenish his chakra, Kiba thinks he's another useless one, but Shikamaru is the only one who believes in Choji. And so when the fight starts, that's what we think, right? Okay, yeah, this guy, nobody likes him, people think he's a joke, but over the course of that fight, as Choji is battling Jirobo, the other characters from the retrieval squadron are talking about Choji, and Shikamaru has complete faith that Choji is going to win. He even tells Choji to go and follow them after he wins this fight. And in the course of that conversation, the other characters become convinced that Choji is going to win, which happens. And it's a very beautiful scene. After Choji kills Jirobo with a massive punch, he sees that his friends carved this arrow on the tree so that Choji could follow where they're going. And he understands at that moment, crying with tears in his face, that, oh, they believed in me. It seems I wasn't useless after all. That's a pretty interesting arc for the character, albeit it was sort of started in this very arc. And Choji dying here would have been very interesting and tragic. It's the first time he realizes, okay, people believe in me, just before his death. But that doesn't really explain why Kishimoto planned to kill him, right? Well, if you see everything that happened in the fight between Choji and Jirobo, that's very clear. First of all, Shikamaru is a bit worried about the pills Choji is taking. He thinks taking anything beyond the green one is extremely dangerous and Choji shouldn't do it. And obviously we know that Choji takes the green, yellow, and red pills. Choji himself acknowledges twice that the red pill is going to kill him, and then he says, oh, I'm gonna die, but I'll take this guy with me. So that's very clear build-up for the character dying if he does something, right? And he does that thing. He takes the red pill. And after the fight ends, we get probably the most blatant symbolism for a character dying we have ever seen in the Naruto series. After Choji sees the arrow carved on the tree, he sits there under the carved arrow, and then there is this quiet wide shot. And if that's not enough for you to see, yeah, this guy's dead, it's a very sad scene, there is this blue butterfly, which is exactly what Choji is, right? When he uses the red pill, he gets these purple bluish wings, the butterfly flies, and then it passes by Shikamaru, who is hopping trees. Shikamaru looks at the butterfly as if it is Choji's spirit, and he gets this very concerned look on his face, so he has to lock in. The other characters even ask Shikamaru if everything is okay, and Shikamaru says, oh no, it's nothing, never mind. It's obviously linking what happened to Choji there, his death, to Shikamaru and everything that's going on. It's the exact same thing that the anime does when Naruto is hopping trees and then he senses the ghostly touch of Jiraiya's hand on his shoulder after he dies, because those two things are happening at the same time. And no, this does not happen in the manga because they invert the order of things in the anime. In the manga, Naruto was fighting against Tobi with the other members of the Konoha battalion as Jiraiya dies, and Naruto emerges out of that pond of water, which I find better than the anime version. But you can see here, this is pretty much what the anime did with Jiraiya and Naruto applied to Choji and Shikamaru in the manga itself in chapter 191. And this was brought up in a podcast that I participated in, the Walkie Talkie podcast channel. I never really connected these two things of Jiraiya and Naruto with Choji and Shikamaru, but it's very similar and a very clear signal that Choji was going to die there. When we go to the Neji fight against Kidomaru, that's an even more difficult fight for the hero. And we have to remember that this is a reformed Neji post-Naruto fight. He's no longer this fatalistic guy that would think you'd have no prospects in life if you don't have a good destiny, quote-unquote, set for you since childbirth. And Neji dying here would make sense narratively as well. Naruto was the one who pulled Neji out of darkness during the Chunin exams, and in here, Neji is fighting for Naruto as Naruto is trying to pull Sasuke out of darkness as he's going with the Sound 4 to Orochimaru. You could even say that, just like his dad, according to Neji at least, he died free here because he chose to go on this mission on his own volition. He chose to sacrifice himself, believing that his new friend Naruto can bring his other friend back from darkness just like he brought Neji himself. And just like in the Choji fight against Jirobo, there's a lot of symbolism of death here. There is that panel with a bird flying and one of its feathers falling down right on Neji's hand. The bird obviously being a motif of Neji's character about freedom and what Neji was trying to achieve. And that symbolism just comes after the fight ends. After we see Kidomaru dies, the feather falls on Neji's fallen hand as well, as if it's telling the world and therefore the audience that Neji died a free person here. He died for his friends. Now yes, unlike the Choji fight, this isn't as blatant, I would say, as a death signal, but it is still pretty damn blatant. Kishimoto could have gone a step further and make Neji's cursed seal disappear from his forehead. However, from a storytelling perspective, this would take away from the tension of whether or not Neji was dead, because then it would have been definitive, and if this was done, Kishimoto couldn't have gone back, because Neji even tells Naruto during the Chunin exams that the cursed seal only disappears when you die. So you could say that Kishimoto may have wanted Neji to survive just by a hair at the end of the arc, because obviously you would need a shot of the cursed seal disappearing to close Neji's character arc. After all, he would need to get rid of the curse and the imprisonment that was forced upon him by his clan. So maybe because that didn't show up, the feather could just be another piece of symbolism that Neji is breaking the prisons of the Hyuga clan further, not that he's going to die doing so in this particular scene, right? Because if Kishimoto was to kill Neji, and he eventually does that, you have to see the cursed seal disappearing, which we do see in the war. So maybe Kishimoto planned for Neji to survive, right? Another argument you can make that Neji was not originally going to die here in the fight against Kidomaru is that he tells Kidomaru, "I am not going to die here," which is kind of a cliche line, but usually when the author includes that line, the character who says it is not going to die even though the situation is dire. It is a strange line for you to include if Neji just goes ahead and dies, right? It makes him seem like a fool, which was definitely not Kishimoto's intention with the scene. Then again, this could also be a misdirect line to make the readers think that, oh, okay, because Neji said that, then he's not gonna die, but then he actually dies, which would be very surprising. But usually writers don't do that, especially Kishimoto, who tends not to do these very overt subversions of expectations. So this line here indicates that, yeah, I guess Neji could have been the bait and switch death. Unlike Choji, Choji is very obviously a death scene. There is no way to misinterpret that. I honestly don't remember what was my reaction the first time I watched the Choji versus Jirobo scene. I don't remember what was my reaction back in the day because I watched it before I read it. After all, I was watching the anime way before I began to read the manga, and this was what, over 15 years ago, so it's been a while. I don't remember what my reaction was, but I'm pretty sure people that read or watch Naruto for the first time are going to be pretty sure that Choji dies, at least. If you remember your first time reaction to the Choji versus Jirobo fight, let me know in the comments, and also for the Neji versus Kidomaru fight. The thing is, those characters didn't appear for a long time, so Kishimoto had a lot of time to change his mind. And what's likely is that Kishimoto was not going to kill both of them, but only one, and the one being Choji is much more likely because of everything I said here. After all, there is this trope in shonen anime that only one good guy character can die per arc. It's obviously being broken these days, and many more shonen manga are being more violent and having more deaths, but back in the day, especially when Naruto was coming out, this was very much a thing. Only one good character can die every arc. That's why Neji is the only relevant good character that dies in the entire war arc, which is a massive arc. So it's likely that Kishimoto would have killed Choji here, which would have made a lot of difference, I would say, because take a look at what happens when Shikamaru learns that even though he failed, his entire squadron was alive. He cries, saying that next time everything is gonna be perfect. I'm not gonna fail again. It's almost this catharsis that, oh, okay, we failed the mission, but at least everyone's alive. It's a cry of release. He released the tension he was feeling because of his failure. But if Choji Choji had died. Choji being very much Shikamaru's best friend, which was developed in this arc. This would have hit Shikamaru much harder, and his cry there wouldn't be a release. It would be a complete desperation. It would have made the arc even darker. Truly the arc when boys became men. When they learned that their comrades will die over the course of their ninja careers, that missions like the one they just took are going to be extremely deadly and require sacrifice. And from an in-universe perspective, it is kind of ludicrous that Neji and Choji survived. Because people don't realize this, but the Sasuke retrieval mission lasted for 2 days. In the first day, Choji fights against Jirobo and Neji fights against Kidomaru. In the second day, there's all the other fights, because right after the Neji versus Kidomaru fight, we see that the sun is setting, we see that night comes, and all the other fights happen the next day. So Choji and Neji were just agonizing there after their fights for over 24 hours. Choji having used this deadly pill that he was certain was going to kill him, and Neji having 2 gaping holes on his torso, bleeding to death for 24 hours. So now he sends a medic team after Naruto fights Sasuke, which is the last fight in the arc. And somehow, Choji and Neji are still alive after that entire day of agonizing pain and anguish on the ground there with severe wounds. Now, some people say that Kishimoto was going to kill other characters too originally because they don't have as much development in Shippuden, like Rock Lee, for example, but I don't think so. I think those two are definitely the ones he was planning to kill, especially Choji. Maybe Neji was going to be a bait and switch. Like, Choji is the one who dies and Neji barely makes out, and that's because we don't see his curse still disappearing. But when it comes to Rock Lee, Kiba, and Shikamaru, it's obvious that Kishimoto had planned for the Sand siblings to arrive and save them very cathartically, so they couldn't die. The other two, the ones who did not get help, they die, which makes a lot of sense from a narrative standpoint as well. Camaraderie is important, and the redemption of the Sand Village comes in this arc with them saving 3 important Konoha characters. But Neji and especially Choji, they were supposed to go. And obviously we'll never know exactly why Kishimoto saved them, but usually it comes down to you being a little apprehensive in your story when you kill a good guy character. Even though Choji was not exactly a massive character in the Naruto series, it would still have repercussions, but all in all, they would have been better for the story. Not that it ruins the Sasuke Retrieval Arc or anything, it's just that the development Choji gets in Shippuden kind of undoes what Choji was back in Naruto Part 1, because in Shippuden he becomes like this gentle guy that doesn't want to hurt people. He's too afraid to punch Edo Asuma because Asuma used to be his sensei. He can't move because his dad died, so Kakashi has to sacrifice himself to save him using Kamui. But in Naruto Part 1, Choji's arc was that he wasn't confident. He believed himself useless. It was a very different thing, even though it may feel similar. So at the end of the day, with hindsight of what happens to Choji in Naruto Shippuden, it would have been better for Choji's character to die in the Sasuke Retrieval Arc. Now, if you want to watch the retcon Kishimoto did to Chidori, click on the video on your screen right now. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and ring notifications. Please do all those things. They're very helpful and they only take 2 seconds. And thank you so much for watching.